Hi, so I'm here today with Eric Chaney, who's a retired flight medic. I'll let him tell you more about what he does, but we're here to talk to um, counselors and social workers and other kinds of providers that are taking the first responder intervention specialist level 1 training. Eric, welcome. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
You want to start with talking about what you've done career-wise as a first responder?
I started when I was 24. I started on the ambulance. Actually, right before that, a little bit, I was on the sheriff's department in Los Angeles County. Half my family is in law enforcement. It seemed like the way to go, but once I was in it, it's like, no, I'd always wanted to be a paramedic.
Really?
Way back in the 70s, there was the emergency TV show, for those who remember it, and that was it, Hooked. But it was so easy getting on the police department because of my family. That's, of course, I went, and then I was like, I can't, no. And I really wanted to do it. So I went, and my wife was very encouraging because we just got married. She's like, go in the medical. And so I did, went to EMT school, and did that for 2 years, and then went into paramedic school. Did that for 6 years, and then got hired on the flight team. Did that for 20 years.
So you really liked that?
Yeah, so all together I did 30 years on the ambulance and 20 years on a helicopter.
Wow, 30 years on an ambulance?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Usually people move off into other things, but I was hooked. I really liked it.
What'd you like about it?
I liked there was a part of it, there was an excitement to it, of course. You know, it's the code 3 with your hair on fire kind of thing. So I liked that adrenaline rush. There was a there was a skill level that was required, and so there was a personal kind of challenge to do things right, do the best you can. So I liked that challenge to it. Mm-hmm. And, I loved flying. I miss that a lot. That was great. And because we covered quite a big area, and we flew up into the mountains into Yosemite National Park. Wow. And then all the way over to San Francisco and that Bay Area. So the scenery was wonderful. So I really missed that part of it.
Yeah, that's a lot, large area to cover.
Yeah, very big. 250 square miles.
Wow.
Radius around. It's pretty big.
All kinds of calls, or what was?
Yeah, it was, flying. Yeah, flying pretty much two different things. There were either somebody at an outlying hospital that would be just too sick for that facility to manage, and that the local ground ambulance personnel were not trained or qualified to transfer them to another hospital, or they'd be trauma scenes where the patient was extremely critical and needed rapid transport to a trauma center. Those were usually somewhere about an hour transport away from the bigger hospitals. So it would be like, for here, it'd be like somebody being hurt up in Grants and needing to get down to UNM or something like that. So,
and that would take like an hour? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. A lot of times.
And I know at times you've talked about like the difference in the actual vehicle. Tell me a little bit about that. Like a helicopter versus like the size.
The helicopters themselves, or versus ground ambulance?
No, the helicopters themselves, because isn't there a difference in size?
Yeah, there is. The ones that are here locally, and actually I used to work for the company PHI that's here, the little yellow ones, and this was all in California that I worked. It's the same company. It's a very small aircraft. And you can't, I always likened it to being in the backseat of a car trying to work on the driver. Having to reach over or having a very limited space to try to do things. So you did a lot of things ahead of time to get them prepped, and then maybe you could just do a few things while you were in the aircraft. And most of my career, fortunately, was in a bigger aircraft where you could actually get up and move around. That was better. I always thought, because you can get to every access. because then you could really get somebody in the aircraft faster and go.
And is it just the size of the aircraft? Is it dependent on the department, or how's that determined?
The size of the aircraft generally is determined on the cost of maintaining. It's very expensive. The aircraft, the small aircraft that I was in, was about $2 million, and the one I was in last, the bigger one, was about $5 million cost in operating. And one of the reasons we still had the bigger one is because we did people that were in high risk labor, and so we needed the bigger room in case the baby came, and be able to. In the smaller aircraft, you couldn't get there and do anything. So that's why we had the bigger one.
That would be really difficult because you were pretty limited, it sounds like, in terms of what you could do on the smaller.
Yeah.
Medically,
you could. Yeah. If somebody went into cardiac arrest, it's not a whole lot you could do because you could as you're flying, but if you're going to land or take off or anything, you got to be in your seatbelt. You just have to make that determination of, look, this is not my emergency. If this aircraft rolls over or something, I'm not going to get killed or thrown out or anything because this person went into cardiac arrest. It's got a good chance they're not going to survive anyway. And there's nothing you could do. You just kind of sit there for a little bit and go, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. So, yeah, you're right. Some things you could and some things you couldn't.
What would you say were some of the stressors in your profession?
Well, believe it or not, I think to me, it was the things outside of taking care of patients. There was the criticalness of the patients and the challenge of, boy, this person is really messed up, and I've got to do this, this, and this, and this. But it was everything that went along with it. It was the no sleeping. It was the hours away from home. It was all the paperwork. It was the constant review of what you did. And it didn't start out that way as much, but as time grew and there got to be more quality assurance and more scrutiny on what you were doing and everything, it was all that other stuff started piling up. And we do a flight or an ambulance run that maybe take us an hour and have 4 hours of paperwork. And then you drive home after that going, oh, if I'm going to get a phone call and somebody'd say, why didn't you put 2 IVs in this person instead of 1? And so there's always that anticipation for a while that you're going to get a phone call, I found blood on this EKG lead. Why didn't you clean it off? And it was, and eating bad or not eating at all. And a lot of those outside things that were really more of a stress than the actual going on these calls.
It's hard to eat healthy and be in that field,
Terribly. Yeah, terribly. And which is one of the big problems that I have now is how much weight I've gained, because you just don't stop and realize how physically active you are, and picking
like the job.
Yeah, because you're carrying gurneys, or you're sweating in an aircraft, or you're pulling somebody out of a bathtub and carrying somebody up and down stairs, and it's very physically demanding at times. And when I stopped working, I didn't change my diet at all, but all of a sudden it's like, God, I'm gaining weight like crazy. And I'm not doing anything different, but it was the lack of physical activity that changed so dramatically. And the fact that I was actually sleeping and was eating, or had the availability to eat. Well, a lot of times I went a whole day without eating.
Wow.
Sometimes. You just couldn't. You didn't have... Oh, there's some crackers in the break room. I might go get a couple of those.
So you couldn't... Did you not have relief? Or what kept you from taking like a lunch break?
Well, in the helicopter, just didn't have a chance. You could come in for shift at 8 a.m. and you'd just be gone, 9 o'clock at night. You come back and, you just had, a couple sips of really bad coffee at the ER. They've been sitting there for a couple days, and maybe some crackers or something, and like, let's go. Because, when you went to, place to place to place, like you run into a hospital, it's not like on an ambulance you could pull over at Burger King and pick something up and take it with you. it's airport to airport, or it's airport to hospital, or
That's
it's
true.
hospital to some field where the guy had an accident. And,
And you're just, what would you land? Like, would you be in a hangar when you would go from airport to airport?
we were
Strip,
on the helicopter. We were at the airport, so it would be.
But you can eat.
Well, we'd bring our stuff to the station. Doesn't mean we necessarily got to it, and like I said, there's no way you could pull over. The ambulance was completely different. You could grab stuff, but it wasn't like you went out of service to stop and eat. So you might pick it up and then get a call. And
So were you a paramedic on the ambulance?
Yes. I was an EMT for a couple of years until I went into paramedic school, but I still worked as an EMT on the ambulance while you're going to paramedic school. Mm-hmm. And I was a paramedic from 1987 until I stopped working. So it was 27 years, roughly.
And so is that the same thing as a flight medic? Is it a paramedic, or are they different?
Well, sort of yes, sort of no. It's one of those, I'm kind of doing the same thing I do on the ground, even though I have a lot more training. For what's different is you have to know everything and do everything the flight nurse is doing. So we really acted independently. We switch. So it's your call, it's my call. And so I had to know everything the nurse was doing and responsible for not only the medical knowledge, but all the skills that they were doing too. Because you get in an aircraft, you're kind of limited room. You can't sit in one place where you can do a procedure and the nurse just can't reach somebody and go, well, I'm a paramedic, I can't do that. No, you would do it. You're trained to do it. Maybe you didn't document it that way, but you just had to. So there was a lot more knowledge, a lot more responsibility, even though technically, some of the job would not be any different.
Mm-hmm. As a flight medic.
Yeah, as far as the taking care of patients. It would be the other stuff like, the aircraft safety and that kind of stuff that would be different.
How did your career affect your family?
Well, it was just the hours away. I was fortunate enough for a large majority of my career to work in a station, like at a firehouse. It'd be like a firehouse. And so my wife could come visit when we had a child, bring him over. I worked with a lot of female partners, so they would sit and play with my son. And when he was young, my wife could sit and have dinner maybe and talk. And there was a lot of times, of course, she'd show up and I'd be rolling out the door. Oops. But maybe she could come back. Maybe she. So I still had some interaction with them. Once I started flying, though, I was, a couple hours away from my house, and they couldn't just come down there for a visit. And I could be gone for hours and hours and hours and hours. So then I was really away from them. But we always kept very close, as technology got better and better with texting and cell phones and how you doing? Hi, honey, I'm going on a flight. I'll be gone a while. And
made it easier.
So she wouldn't worry about me and I wouldn't about her. But it was tough because you had to totally compartmentalize out what was going on with your family to do your job.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Well, because you could have something going on at the house. Like, let's just say the water faucet blew or the washing machine's leaking and beep, I got to go on a flight. Mm-hmm. You can't have those things in your mind when I'm going to go out there and start a $5 million aircraft that could kill all of us in 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. And because I forgot to lock this door and it's going to fly up. You just had to shut all that off and, okay, I'm on my job. I do this. And then
switch gears.
Yeah, you had to totally, you're going to have to handle stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and thank God my wife was the type of person that could.
I think all of you have to be with spouses that are very independent and can think and function on their own, because I think that's the nature of the beast, right? Is you're gone, it's unpredictable when you come back, all of that.
Yeah, and of course, like I said, she encouraged me to get into this so we wouldn't end this from the start. It wasn't like I was in it And then she married into it, like, oh gosh, I didn't know it'd be like this.
Mm-hmm.
She knew what she was getting into, and it's been with me the whole way. But yeah, was very independent before. And so if something needed to be dealt with, she could do it without me. And then we just talk about it later. But yeah, you had to shut that off. Mm-hmm. But it was the hours being gone, too, that was really tough. Because I would come home, and the first thing I might have to do is go to bed. Mm-hmm. Because I'd already been up for 44 hours. I'm not going to stay up another 8 or 12 to visit with family or, go do this or go to the grocery store. And he's like, I'm going to bed. And I'd be to bed for 12 hours because the next day I'd be back again. Mm-hmm. And so I had that time away from them just sleeping.
So it's like even when they had you physically, it wasn't like they had your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd be asleep a lot of the time.
I'd be asleep or just kind of groggy and out of it.
Do you feel like the job changed you? Do you remember?
It did, because I was very picked on as a kid. My dad we were a small area, a community where I grew up. And so my dad was very well known as the police officer in the county kind of thing. And so I got picked on and harassed a lot with the kids. And so I was very insecure about that. And like, why is everybody picking on me? I didn't do anything. And once I got into that career and was very successful in it, then yeah, it made me feel better. It gave me a lot more confidence in myself.
So it helped you. It was a good change.
I was always afraid to touch people. It's like, I don't know why. I had this phobia. I don't want to put my hands on. Well, you have to put your hands on people, in people, and all over people. And so that all went away. So yeah, it changed me that way emotionally, of being a success in my career where, kids were picking on me where I didn't understand. And it was really bothered me.
Did it change you in any not so good ways?
Well, I think, I guess if you want to say not so good, I think it detached me from the general public and not wanting to deal with them. Mm. Like, I'm the type that would want to come home, close the blinds, not ever go out. Lock the doors. Too much bad stuff is happening out there. I don't want to be a part of it. And just cocoon myself in my house. I'm out in the big scary world. People are getting shot and beat up and car wrecked and heads blown off. And, babies are getting run over by dump trucks. And I want to stay inside, close the doors, and watch a baseball game.
Not deal with any of that.
And not deal with that. So it became, I would say, and I'm even that way now, is be very reclusive.
Was that a problem with the family at all? I mean, did your family ever make remarks about that? Like, we never see you? Or
No.
No?
No.
Maybe because your dad was in law enforcement, and so it probably was pretty similar.
It could be. Other than my mom and dad and my sister, everybody else was in Southern California, so the family. So it wasn't like there's a big family that you were ignoring. But, my wife is my best friend in the whole world. And so that's all that mattered. It was her and I, and then our son when he came along. And that was it. So I didn't care about the neighbor. Even now, today, I only know one neighbor in my neighborhood. Because they came over when we moved in, brought us cake. Hi, how you doing? So I know them, kind of, not socially, but I kind of know them by name. But I don't know anybody else. I don't want to know. Mm-hmm. I don't want to know. I'm just here with my wife in my house. Leave me alone.
And you think that comes from the job?
Just being around people? I think a lot of it does. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and then the stuff that you guys are exposed to is like repeated over and over and over 30 plus years. That's a lot of conditioning.
It really is. And I've talked to you about it too, of being strong in faith, where a lot of guys aren't. You explain to me why this child got smashed, or like a call we had one time is the mother and daughter running up to the ski resort, and they're happy, and these two drunk teenage kids went over the median, landed on the car, crushed the kid in the backseat. Explain that, God. And so there'd be a lot of them. It's like, there is no God. There's, how can, and so, I have to take it from the other side of, I don't understand, but, it makes my faith stronger. And also what helps in that too is my thoughts of people passing. It was easier for me to say, you're sick. It's sad that you died, but you're in a better place.
Because of the job?
Yeah, I think
How did it?
yeah,
What's
I think
the difference
so.
in the mindset?
Well, it's like I said, some people either are just going to pass, or there's nothing you can do about it, or they did something to themselves, like set themselves on fire. There's nothing you can really do about it. You're a dumbass. But you always grieve for the people that leave behind, not for because of my faith. You always think the person's in a better, if they're a believer, they're in a better place. I don't grieve for them. My father had cancer and some other problem. When he died, it was great. Thank goodness. My mother has Alzheimer's, can't remember any of that. I hope she goes soon, because I hate seeing her like that. And it wouldn't bother me if she did. If I got a phone call today and said, your mother's passed, I'd be like, great. She's in a better spot now.
Right.
So, it's just a different mentality, seeing death so much, of my mindset being that they're okay now. And you grieve for everybody that's left.
So again, like you're saying, it depends what your beliefs are. Because some people that don't believe.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them don't.
There's a lot of, you and I have talked before, how there's a lot of pessimism.
Mm-hmm.
And a first responder will be the first to tell you how pessimistic you guys can be.
Yeah.
And joke about it and be like, oh, that dark humor,
Yeah.
And laugh about it and say, oh, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, my parents were like that, and some of that was law enforcement, and some of it wasn't, but it's like, oh, there's always something. Can anything happen that's good? And, so one more thing will happen bad, and you kind of get into that mindset. Everything's going to happen to be bad. The joke is, if I don't have to look forward to something, I'll never be disappointed that it didn't go right. Just always think, oh, something's going to go wrong, or it'll never happen. You won't get those tickets to the baseball game you wanted, so you won't be disappointed you didn't get them, because don't think happy thoughts.
That kind of sucks. So do you have a hard time with that, or have you been able to move past that?
I still have that tendency.
Uh-huh. And then do you kind of catch yourself and...
Well, yeah, either I do or my wife does.
Uh-huh.
Because she's not that way. But she'll point it out and say, you sound like your parents.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, but it is a big thing with the field. I think that is like a pretty common thread. And I can imagine, if you hear people at their worst over and over and over and over daily... It'd be pretty hard to, have this positive...
Well, yeah, it was harder in law enforcement. When I was just the 6 months I was on the sheriff's department, it was like everybody was a bad guy. Because that's all you saw, is crime, everything. You're arresting people. And it wasn't the good stuff of, I fell down on that, the poor old lady that fell down and can't get off the, hurt herself or broke her hip. It wasn't her fault. Broke her hip and fall. I always say technically that's what happens. But it wasn't her fault. So there's the compassionate side of, I'm here to help you. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't negative. The world is negative. It was more of, bad things happen. Mm-hmm. You never know. Any second something could happen, or we could be sitting here and bang, 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 and next thing you know, you're gone.
So just kind of a mindset of, go with the flow. Like, okay, crap happens.
Yeah, yeah. It does. Yeah, a lot of crap happens. You see it.
Well, and it does. But I think, no doubt. But I think that your guys' mindset, it's almost like I want to say like a callousness.
Yes.
To bad things.
Yes.
Not only an expectation for bad things, there's the pessimism, but also then like a callousness, almost like. It's interesting because, you have to have compassion to do your job and want to help people. But then the flip side of that, what I've noticed, in first responders is there's almost like a callousness, which I understand. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to accept that death happens and tragedy happens, and
Yeah, and because there's certainly the dark humor that goes along with it, and laughing at other people's, miseries.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. Some of it's self-inflicted, like if they've been drunk and they slam themselves on a wall and they're.
Talk about the dark humor for a little bit, because I haven't talked about that yet. I think that'd be good for them to hear about.
I think it's.
What is it, first of all?
Well, if you saw somebody have perhaps some tragic event, maybe they were drunk and they slammed into a wall and half their head's missing, and go, "Oh God, did you see that guy? What a mess." Where maybe the normal person would just be freaked out and throw up, and like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this," and we're sitting around, we could sit there at an autopsy eating a sandwich. But yeah, it looks pretty bad. Yeah, and in fact, it just happened. My mother fell down and split her head open. I mean, it's one of the worst scalpings I've ever seen of an injury. And I walked in the emergency room and said, "Gee, Mom, that looks pretty bad," and was laughing.
As you're laughing now?
Yeah, as I am now, because I knew from my training and everything, I knew she wasn't really hurt. It's skin tear and needs stitches.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had the guys set themselves on fire because they threw gasoline on the barbecue thinking that was going to help. And go, what an idiot. And so the compassion level for somebody like that is like zero. But then you see somebody that, got struck in the street because somebody ran a red light, say. Then you'd feel bad there because, it wasn't their fault. Just one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But you might laugh about it because there was maybe something involved that was weird, like they got thrown over the fence into somebody's lawn and then the dog started biting them, or something like that. That would be funny, maybe. It shouldn't be, but it's like, yeah, this guy, and he got thrown over and the dog started chewing on him.
Do you think...
it shouldn't be funny, but in a ways it is, and it's almost a way to deal with the stress.
I was going to say, so do you think there's ever times... I think it is a way to deal with the stress. Do you think that there's times when if you stop somebody, a first responder, if a counselor says, okay, draws attention to it, why are you laughing right now? I've noticed you're laughing. Just somehow. Do you think that it's ever to kind of mask the real emotions that are going on?
Could be. I don't know. It's hard to have that as a general statement for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
It just could be just a way of just dealing with, a stressful situation, but not because you're trying to mask something like, I'm going to really be upset because this person got hurt, so I better laugh about it. It's more just a general, like you said, callousness, which is a really good way to put it, of, bad stuff happens to a lot of people, and if I'm going to do this, I can't get upset over every little call. And it's just, like, wow, that was really bad. What's for lunch today? You just kind of gone, and you move on to the next thing.
And can go from a horrific call to go to eat lunch.
Yeah.
And just really talk about compartmentalizing.
Yeah, very much.
Really be able to just put that away and boop, on to the next.
Yeah. Yeah, because very rarely have I ever, in the 30 years, had anybody, after a hellacious call or anything, sit there and go, wow, I'm really upset. It was always like, wow, that was really bad. Next call, let's clean up. And got to get things back together and cleaned up because we're going to get another one.
Oh yeah, there's probably no
time. And
it
would just be move on to the next one. Run.
So even some of those, that one artist, Dan's son, and then anyways, but he'll do like the back of an ambulance. He'll paint the back of an ambulance and all this blood all over, and like there's not even time to process any of that. Like you just have to get the unit or rig or whatever you call it cleaned up and.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's in any of your presentations before, but I think I know which one you want. It's the paramedic or EMT, and he's just looking at this mess, and you think the person is sitting there going, wow, we tried to save this person's life, and wow, we just did everything we could. Now what he's doing is thinking, where am I going to start? This place is a mess, and I got to clean this up. And like nowadays, they have a time limit.
Wow.
You know, it's like you got 20 minutes from a code 3 call or something or anything, get back in service because you got to go again. So it's like, oh my gosh, what do? Get a broom, get a hose. you know, where do I start? It's a mess.
Are they made like that to just like where you just can hose it down, or
some are.
With
yeah, but you
like
can't.
hygiene and stuff like that.
And in the old days we kind of did, but nowadays you don't want to just wash blood on the street or something like that. It's kind of a hazardous, waste. So
I wonder how they do that now. How they take care of that. What the protocol is for that,
Towels and wipes and gloves and things like that.
So you have to actually clean it. That's another traumatic thing. I mean, having to get in there,
Yeah.
To me, like back in the day when you could rinse it out, that's one level of trauma. But like when you have to actually, even though you're gloved up, but when you have to get in there and do that,
yeah. Because sometimes you go like, oh, I think that's part of his brain.
Yeah.
What is that? Oh, it's great. Yeah, it's some brain matter there. Sometimes.
Yeah, wow.
But it wouldn't be like, oh, there's part of his brain. It's like, oh, cool. There's part of his brain there. Wow, look at that.
Well, you almost would have to react like that internally even because, otherwise a person would be crying and falling apart all the time. And there just isn't, that's why it does, I think that's the aspect of the work that does change you guys because you can't just react the way what would be within normal range of reaction.
And
you can't.
And for the most part, very, very, very. I think I've estimated I've maybe been on like 15,000 calls.
Wow.
And maybe 5 of them were people I knew. So these are all strangers. I don't have any emotional attachment to them. It's a human being that I'm trying to care for.
Well, what happened with the people you did know? Was it different for you emotionally?
Just the after part. You're not doing the job, but it would be, okay, we're done now. How are they? Mother-in-law is in the hospital because she had a seizure, whatever it is. And it's the after part. And it would be the same when I started to say about the stranger part is this person either wasn't talking or couldn't communicate or you didn't know them to a point. You get them to the hospital after you did what you did and then you leave them. You didn't get the family coming in over and crying over the person that is deceased. You don't have any exposure to that. You had here you go, I'm out of here. And now fallout would come later. So you weren't as exposed to that for the most part. And back in the day, you transported everything. You nowadays, they finally figured out, look, you're not doing anything different transporting than they are working on them now. So nowadays, and toward the end of my career, it was a lot more of working on somebody. You got to the point they're not going to come back. And then you stop. Okay, there's no point. We're stopping. Well, the family would be there. Mm-hmm. And then you would have to deal with that emotional part of it.
Now, isn't it more regulated? And maybe it's not across the board, but I know that some of the fire paramedics, like depending on the call and like the condition, they have to work a person. Like there's a protocol. Okay, for this.
Well, there's always been that. In fact, actually, it's more loose. It was extremely tightly restricted on what you did. In fact, you go on a call where a person needed to be defibrillated because they were in cardiac arrest, and you'd have to call and ask permission. Now, anybody, a citizen that has a defibrillator sitting there can go slap them on and do it. It's kind of silly. So it's more independent. There were very, very few things that you'd ever have to call the hospital and say, hey, I think I need to do this. And it was all in standing orders, what they call. Well, when I started, it was everything you had to ask permission for, to the point of it being silly. So I feel there's more responsibility now, or more chance also of making errors, Because you're in an ambulance, let's say you're totally in the back of the ambulance doing your own thing. It's like, should I put another IV? Should I give him more medicine? Should I do this medicine? So you're making a decision, hope you're doing it right. Flying, I had a flight nurse to bounce things. We bounce things off each other. You think we should do this and that, and so you had to check and balance.
Talk about that for a little bit, because I think that's important, is the whole concept of having to do things right. How much does that impact you guys, during and after?
I've been it brought out the notion of how much of a perfectionist I am. Because I could do something just at home, and let's say I went to a grocery store and I forgot one item, whatever. I would kick myself, you idiot, it's okay, you just forgot. But I was at work, I can't make a mistake. It'd be like taking an exam. Well, you got 95% on the exam, great. Well, that meant 5% of the time I made the wrong decision. I can't do that. What if it was the wrong drug? Everything had to be, for the most part, perfect. Mm-hmm. Or absolutely the best of your ability. Sometimes you couldn't, like if I was starting an IV and I couldn't get it because there was some reason. That's a skill. But, if you gave the wrong dose of a drug, you can't do that. You could kill somebody. So there definitely was a point of you can't make a mistake. And so what I translated back to home is I'd be really hard on myself when I would make a mistake, even if it wasn't a very big one. It's like, well, but it's a mistake.
Well, and it's hard, you and I have talked about it, is a life and death situation. So,
yeah.
There's that reality and irrational thinking that kind of, rub right on each other. Like, it's a life and death situation, but at the same time, you can't be perfect. I mean, there is human error, and so.
Yeah, I was very hard on myself, really especially earlier on. It got toward the point where, like, I'd put a cannula in somebody and hook it up, and I forgot to turn it on. And it took me a couple minutes to realize. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, geez, I forgot. Where before I'd be really upset because, like, oh my God, what if I forgot? What if? There was a lot of what ifs.
Mm-hmm. That you would think about.
Yeah.
What if? Uh-huh.
I blew this. I didn't do this. Why didn't I remember this? That's so basic, and things like that.
How much did you used to dwell on that kind of stuff?
All the
Shoulda,
time.
oughta, coulda.
All
maybe,
the time.
And is that still with you? Because you've been retired now how long?
3 years. 4 from the helicopter, 3 from the ambulance.
Well, or obsessed, that's another term for that,
Yeah, do a lot. Mm-hmm. Even on just the little things. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, dummy, why didn't you? Mm-hmm. Why didn't you remember to do that? Or start to put the EKGs things on backwards. No, the white one goes on the right side. What are you thinking? And at a point where it was, okay, that really didn't hurt somebody. Uh-huh. It would be less, but
it's still there.
It's still there,
uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, what kinds of calls did you find most frustrating? What kinds of things did you enjoy the most? I know you've mentioned that a little bit.
The most frustrating would be the call where somebody really didn't need you. Mm-hmm. And, because you go to school, you learn all this stuff. Most of it's like life-saving or supportive care. And then you go on a call for somebody that's drunk. Or they didn't need an ambulance. Mm-hmm. Could have gone in a car. Somebody could have taken them. Like, you called me for this. Mm-hmm. And there would actually be, and I think you'd find this with a lot of people, of first responders, is the frustration of the BS calls.
Yes, I hear that a lot.
Yeah, that you would get. That would be very frustrating as much as a cardiac arrest call. Because then you felt like, well, this is what I'm here for. Whether you're successful or not in helping somebody, it's calls that you didn't need to be called on. Oh,
Well,
very
and that's something that really bothers, sometimes to serious degrees. Like people get really burnt out on that,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen many people that get really enraged, not at the time of the scene, but it's something that wears on them, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about in session about how much anger that can bring up.
Yeah, and as you know, I'm the first private provider that you've dealt mostly with public service firefighters, and I'm a private person. You have a whole different thing of, well, I'm not a firefighter, so you have to deal with that emotions of being thought of as like a second class citizen,
Right.
And going into places, oh, the ambulance drivers are here, and I go, well, yeah, I actually am a paramedic too.
You were the first person that really brought that to my attention.
Yeah.
Because I never had really thought about that or heard about that, to be honest.
Because even if you walk in with a uniform on, they knew you were with the ambulance. As far as you just push on a gurney or a wheelchair or whatever, and it didn't mean anything.
You don't have a skill set.
You don't have a skill. Yeah, you're not a firefighter. I mean, they have calendars with firemen on it, and you're an ambulance.
But and there's always that. So then the cops are like that with the firefighters. The firefighters are like that with EMTs.
Yeah.
So it just goes. Volunteers are another.
Yeah, and I remember this is California where all my experiences from. It really gets to me a lot too. Is when I was at the hospital with my mother recently. Is in the ER was all these photos of first responders. They had firemen. They had ambulance personnel. And everything. There's photographs and nice photographs in the wall. Never saw anything like that back in California. Never, ever any attention.
You would think that. I mean, California's like I would think a more progressive state than New Mexico. So
no, and it's really been something to come here and have the support of first responders and hey, first responder discount, huh? What? Firemen might get a discount, but if you're on an ambulance, no. So that's nice.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a different lifestyle too. Is you don't have that brotherhood of guys in the station. Four-man on engine. Let's go to it. Just you and your partner. That's it. So, and nowadays you typically don't have a station to call home, or so you go sit on a street corner.
So when you retired, did you keep in touch with any of the guys that you worked with?
No, just one. There's one guy that called and said, "How you doing?" And we started the flight program at the same time. So there was obviously a connection because it was 20 years, and so we still stay in touch. But nobody else ever. When I got hurt, nobody ever called me. How you doing?
And so, how did you feel about that?
Well, in one way hurt, and on another way, over the years I did the same thing. Because it's just like I said about the person in the ambulance and looking at the mess. You just move on. It's like me leaving after 20 years was just like another call that somebody had been on that they just got to move on. So it's just next. Be somebody in to replace me, and then that's it. All that attachment is gone. That next person. Come on down. Who's next?
So feeling replaceable?
Very, yeah. Replaceable, disposable. Yeah. That was a real letdown of after all that time in that career of just feeling, disposable.
Well, and that's a career that's very demanding. I mean, it demands your soul pretty much. Your life revolves around it. Your family's life revolves around it.
Yeah, and I didn't have a retirement. Mine was sudden, a car accident. That suddenly injured my back, and I couldn't do the job anymore.
Yeah, you were forced into it.
I was forced into it. So there was no build-up of, hey, it's great, what are you going to do? And all. So it was like one day, bang, you can never work anymore in that field. Done. And so it was talk about a sudden loss.
Right.
And am I going back? I'm not going back. I can't go back. I can't go back. And Now what?
Coming to terms with that, yeah.
You know, and now and then so it was just all that letdown of, you know, being wound up was like a rubber band, real so tight, and then it's just. So.
What about trauma and PTSD, either in what you've experienced or even watching some of your coworkers? You know, what did you see? What did you notice in terms of those conditions?
Yeah, I was just as guilty as some of the other people of if somebody started, you know, if my partner says, wow, that call really bothered me, I would think like, why? It's not any different than the 50 other calls you were on. You know, why would you be bothered? And not being that sensitive to, oh, probably because it reminds you of your grandkid or your son at a certain age, and because I always had the callous attitude, and I also, as far as the post-traumatic stress part of it, it was very difficult for me when I started to have problems to put my finger on it. Like, well, I didn't have an event that triggered this. I didn't have that call put me over the edge, or I didn't have, my buddies were all just shot, blown up by an IED or anything. I didn't, like, what's bothering me? I couldn't figure out what was bothering me. It's still hard to try to put my finger on why am I having these issues. I didn't have this big event that put me over the edge.
Yeah, one of the terms, though, that the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders talks about is repeated exposure. So you didn't have a big event, but you had tons of repeated exposure. Mm-hmm. And I was glad to see that when they did the DSM-5, which is just last year, maybe the year before, they actually put about first responders in there under PTSD and repeated exposure. So,
and in California, it's not, like I said, the Albuquerque area in New Mexico has been a lot more supportive, which has been great. Because if I stayed in California, I don't think I would have got the kind of help. Because, even when I got injured, my boss, it's like, well, what's your problem? I'll just replace you.
Wow.
And pretty much just said that to my face.
Wow. That's awful.
Or if you need, we were always, our crisis management was eat right, exercise, and get some sleep. And there's a 3x5 card on the wall that if you need help, call this number. But there was no training, there was no support, there was no really watching people for signs of problems and what to do with it.
Well, Eric, thanks a lot for coming in and talking and doing this video so that counselors and social workers can get a better idea of what people in your career field go through and experience. And I absolutely will have you back in person. You've spoken before for the classes and trainings that I have, so we'll do it again.
Okay.
Okay, thanks
Great,
a lot.
Thanks.